The New York Rangers officially hired their new head coach in Peter Laviolette, their 37th head coach in franchise history. We want to talk to our New York Post columnist, Larry Brooks. Larry, how you doing, man?
I'm good. The long wait is over.
The long wait is
Our
over.
yeah, our national nightmare is over.
Let's talk about it, Larry. Obviously, it took a while for the Rangers to come to this decision. We saw a
Mhm.
lot of rumors about Laviolette being the front runner for this job, and finally they get to this decision. What did you make of this hire ultimately? Now that the Rangers made it official?
The Rangers have a competent NHL head coach, and I don't mean that as damning Peter Laviolette with faint praise. He is the eighth winningest coach in NHL history. He has won more games than any American coach in the history of the league. He has won a Stanley Cup. He's gone to the finals two other times with two other teams. So, he has a track record of success in the NHL. The last 3 years, his last gig in Washington was not a particularly successful one, but I think there's dysfunction in Washington with the organization. Um, I think they have kind of turned into an Alex Ovechkin aggrandizement operation rather than a team that's serious about winning right now. So I tend to discount the last 3 years. I don't think it was a great. It was not a great experience, I don't think, for anyone in Washington. But when you go back to his tenure in Nashville, where he took a very young team to the Stanley Cup final, his tenure in Philadelphia, where he took the Flyers to the final his first year, his tenure in Carolina, where he won the Cup his second year behind the Carolina bench, and even going back 2 decades to where he was a first-time NHL coach with the Islanders, the improvement was dramatic. So, um, what I've said is, the Rangers aren't hiring someone for a long-term relationship here. If it works out, if that's the way it works out, that's the way it works out. They're looking for someone with whom they can win now. This is not about this is not about a developmental coach. It's not about building from here to next year to the year after to the year after and allowing a coach to grow.
Right.
This is about winning now. And they have a coach who is believes in structure, who has success, who has dealt with a lot of big time players before. The Rangers are not an easy team to coach. We know that. They've chewed through a couple of coaches now, polar opposites in David Quinn and Gerard Gallant. They have a lot of stars on their team who have no move contracts. So, it's not an easy group to coach, and that's why I think, though it's always you can always romanticize hiring a young coach, and everybody wants their own
Right.
John Cooper. Everybody wants their own Rod Brindamore. You have stability. You have a coach who just grows with the team and wins with the team. I don't think this was the scenario in which the Rangers were going to go that way. They spoke to a couple of would-be first-time NHL coaches, but experience, gravitas, track record. I think you pretty much know what you're getting with Peter Laviolette.
Now, Larry, there's been a lot of pushback from fans about the Laviolette hire. It seems like a kind of a same move, like nothing
Mhm.
moves the needle here between
Yeah.
Gallant and Laviolette.
Well,
But
they're different.
go ahead. No, I
They're
mean,
they're
so
very different. They're very different personalities. They approach coaching very differently. Um, Gerard Gallant, again, most often when teams make coaching changes, they're filling in blanks or they're reacting to what went wrong in the previous regime. So David Quinn, um, first time NHL coach coming from college, from BU, he related to the players as if they were almost like college players. And I'm
Mhm.
not condemning David Quinn. David Quinn is a terrific individual and he's a good hockey coach. And listen, his 2019-20 season, he drove them to the tournament in the bubble. They took greater strides than anyone expected that year. Then they fell back
Yep.
the next year. But David was really he related to players as if they were in college, and they weren't. I mean, he was in their business a lot. And it wasn't that he didn't mean to be looking over their shoulder. He wanted to be their friend. He wanted to, hey, what's going on with you? What's going on? But, pros are different, and they want to just come to the rink and work. And so when the Rangers moved on from Quinn, they hired Gallant, who again is diametrically opposed in that. He basically just said, show up, I trust you, I know you're pros. He treated players the way he either was treated when he played. He was a very good player, or he wanted to be treated. And again, it was like, go out and play. He empowered players. Go out and play. Go out and play. Be ready. He wasn't much of a motivator. He didn't, he admitted that. He said, no, I'm not like that. Even this year during the Devils series, he was asked, are you giving him a speech? And he kind of laughed. He said, I'm not like that, But with that empowerment at the end, or at least as the players saw it, and I think there's some reason to agree with their assessment, he wasn't putting them he wasn't necessarily putting them in the best position to win, because he was such a hands-off guy. And he came here, and I know he bristles at this. It may be unfair. He's been a very successful head coach in the NHL. Let's not forget, 2 years with the Rangers, 110 points, 107 points, the 5th best record in the league over those 2 years. They got to the conference finals. They won 13 playoff games. Yep. This is a successful head coach in the NHL, but he's not a wizard at tactics. Nobody ever thought that of him. And I think the players at the end, they had their issues with Quinn. Now they had their issues with Gallant, and it was basically, he wasn't doing enough to help us. We needed help against the Devils. We needed help against Tampa Bay last year, when you can't just roll your line. You can't just send guys out. You need to believe in matching lines, and he just didn't.
Right.
And, that's just his philosophy. I remember talking to him right after he got the job in New York, and it was a phone conversation. And I asked him about matching lines, and he said, no, I don't really believe in it. And I asked him about a checking line. He said, no, I don't really believe in that. I want 3 scoring lines, and then you have your 4th line. And you know what? You can win in the regular season like that, especially when you have skilled guys the way the Rangers do, and a goaltender that the Rangers have. You can win that way, and you can win in the playoffs, and we saw that last year. But I don't think you can win the Stanley Cup that way. I think you need to match. You need to be able to give players something. You need to have a shutdown group.
Make adjustments.
You need to make it. They needed to do a better job on Jack Hughes. I'm not. Carolina smothered Jack Hughes. The Rangers, basically let him go free. So again, what they're moving to is someone who is both a little bit more emotional. Will lift guys up or rebuke guys. He can be an emotional guy, but he's also a hands-on tactician. He also believes in structure, and I'm not saying that Gerard Gallant didn't believe in structure. Everyone wants structure, but it didn't seem to be a priority, or he just couldn't instill it in the group. And again, it's a hard group to coach. It is. They have a lot of skilled guys, and they are, they're 8, 10, 12 years into their careers. They're kind of set. You have to be able to give them a little bit of help, and so it's going to be a challenge. It is going to be a challenge for Laviolette, but the Rangers have to be harder to play against. They have to be more structured. They have to just, they have to be, a little bit more straight line in their thinking. And again, you don't have to play that way every night. You can win in the regular season without it, but you need to develop playoff habits during the regular season. And that's what I expect to see. I expect to see, this is now the third coach in 4 years. It's going to be the system in 4 years. So I don't know whether they're going to get off to a great start learning a new system. Again, even when Vigneault replaced Tortorella, it took a long time for the Rangers to adapt to Vigneault.
Yeah.
Really for months. And it was give and take whether they were going to make the playoffs that year. They wind up going to the finals, and then the next year they win the President's Trophy. But it took, it was an adjustment period. It was an adjustment period from Rennie to Torts, from Torts to Vigneault, from Vigneault to Quinn, from Quinn. So it's going to be an adjustment period for these guys. But again, I think the bottom line is maybe it's not the sexiest hire. Maybe it's kind of going back to a recyclable. But as I've written a number of times, Vegas.
Bruce Cassidy. Yeah, you wrote about it.
His third team, right? Paul Maurice, the finalist.
Yep.
5 tours of duty. Pete DeBoer, Dallas coach, 5th team.
Lindy Ruff,
who's been coaching for 25 years. So it's not unique to the Rangers that they hire an experienced coach, and it also doesn't mean failure. That guys succeed. There are reasons why coaches succeed. And again, we know they all have relatively short shelf lives, but this is a short shelf life job.
Yeah.
This is win 16 playoff games next year. So it's not it's not about 3 years from now. It's not about building as a team. It's about winning now with a win now roster.
So what's interesting, Larry, is when you talk about Laviolette and the type of coach that the Rangers are getting, my question to follow up before we get more into that is the timeline here. The Rangers seem to have gone through a couple of different candidates, including you heard names like John Hines. Was there a rumor out there too that they could have been waiting for what happens in Pittsburgh with that situation with Mike Sullivan? Why did it take so long for the Rangers to come to Laviolette and make this decision to hire him, you feel like?
Well, I think you sort of answered, the question. They were monitoring Pittsburgh.
Okay.
It was always it was always going to be a long shot. It was always a far-fetched scenario that Dubas would go to Pittsburgh, either bring Sheldon Keefe with him or not necessarily coexist with Mike Sullivan. Because Mike Sullivan has been elevated by the ownership. He now has, it seems that he has more responsibility than just simply a head coach. Maybe that changes now that Dubas is there. But believe me, the Rangers were watching and they were monitoring. And when the first block fell, when Dubas left Toronto, and then the second block fell and Dubas signed with Pittsburgh, even though there had been denials all around, and Mike Sullivan had told our colleague Molly Walker that I'm here for the long haul, the Rangers were still waiting because things happen. So they were waiting to see what happened there. They were waiting to see if Sheldon Keefe would become available for an interview. And then when Hines became available, Drury did his due diligence on John Hines, a former college roommate, a former college teammate. There was research done on him. He's prepared, detail-oriented. But I think the issue with Hines is that here are the Rangers, as we talk about the mandate here, the mission statement is going to be to win the Stanley, is going to be to win 4 rounds next year. And in 8 years of coaching in the NHL, John Hines has never won a single playoff round. Now, he's a competent coach. He is. He got a Hart Trophy season out of Taylor Hall. He got the best year of Taylor Hall's career.
Right.
He drove a pretty nondescript Devils team to the playoffs, but there hasn't been more than that. And I think when you're comparing track records and your mission is to win now, I just don't think Laviolette. I think Hines does not measure up to Laviolette.
Right.
Laviolette was always there. Apparently, he was not putting pressure on the Rangers. He never said, "I need to know tomorrow."
Yeah.
I think there was always an understanding that he was going to be there unless something dramatic happened. And what happened was Laviolette.
Yeah. So it's interesting you put it that way. So my question here for all of this is you put the onus of the Rangers obviously know this is a tough job. There's a Stanley Cup mandate here. The pieces are already there with the veterans, the young players progressing. So when you talk about this Rangers team and the way Chris Drury is trying to build this roster out, and Laviolette's now inheriting this roster, how does Laviolette coach these guys into getting them to that next level and take that next step to the Stanley Cup final? I mean, you're talking about, like you said, veterans who have been in the league for 8-9 years. They're not going anywhere. They have no trade clauses. How is he going to get guys like Artemi Panarin to buy into his system? Guys like Chris Kreider, Mika Zibanejad, Vinny Trocheck. How do these pieces fit? And then also, how does he handle the younger players when it comes to a guy like Alexis Lafreniere, Capo Caco, Filipino? Is he going to be able to bring those guys along and get them to take that next step? Because that's ultimately seems like it's been holding back this Rangers roster is those kids taking that next step to help support those veterans and bring that secondary scoring and take them to that next level.
Well, I think there are two questions. One, he's going to need buy-in by all their players. How? That's his, that's why he's a coach.
Yeah.
He's going to have to find the key. And I think, again, you can sell yourself to a room by saying, look, we won the Stanley Cup this way, went to the finals this way, I did this way. I don't say that I know everything, but we're all in this together. He's a very much we're all in this together kind of guy. But he also is, demands accountability. And look, it's going to be his communication skills. These players want help. They do. Listen, I wouldn't make an excuse for any one of them. Their performance in 3 out of the last 4 games against the Devils was just inexplicable. They just didn't show up for 3 out of the last 4 games. That's on them. And my understanding is, having talked to a number of guys, is that they are properly disappointed with themselves, that they understand they let themselves down. Now, was this a team good enough to win the Stanley Cup? Probably not, especially with Patrick Kane being so ineffective because he just was 30%. I mean, who knows? So were they capable of winning the cup? Probably not. Were they capable of winning a first round series against New Jersey with a 2-0 lead yes, they were. They were capable of doing more. And I think they recognize that they let themselves down. I think they want to be held to account. And again, in their exit meetings with Drury, and not every one of them, but voices that matter, they asked for help. They did. They wanted a different. They wanted more structure. So I think the Rangers are going to be very receptive to Peter Laviolette's message. And again, listen, you've gone through one inexperienced coach. You've basically booted him out.
Yeah.
You've gone through a second coach. You basically booted him out. It's the same way a general manager doesn't get to fire coach after coach after coach, and unless you're Lou Lamoriello. players don't get to fire coach after coach after coach. So I think that, this is kind of it for this group. It's the core has been together pretty much now since 2019-20.
Yeah.
When they added Panarin, when they added Trouba, they then had Kako, and then the next year they were going to have Lafreniere. So Adam Fox joined in 1920. Shesterkin came up in the middle of that season. So there's been the nucleus there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is probably this nucleus's last ride. A couple of their no moves expire after this season. So I think they're going to be very receptive to being coached. The other part of it is, Lafreniere, Kako, Hedel, they're important players. I don't know where they fit at this point.
That's kind of like my follow-up question.
Because I look at the personnel, and I think this is a team that needs a checking line. They need a matchup line. I'm not sure when I look at the personnel who does that job.
Yeah.
So this may not be the roster. The other issue is their cap situation. They are just straitjacketed. I look at it and I don't understand how the math is going to work for them.
Yeah.
They have somewhere around 11.5, 11.7 to fill 8 roster spots, and 2 of those spots are Lafreniere and K'Andre Miller.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I don't know. And so the popular theory is well, they'll move Barclay Goodrow. 3.6, it's too much for a fourth line player. I wouldn't have him on the fourth line. I would want to reconstruct the team to have him as part of their checking line, but they may not be able to afford that. So, if they move Goodrow, so then, all right, so they pick up 3.6, but then there's another player to replace. So that's 9 for 14, whatever it is. And you've lost an important player, and you're going to have to get more players like Barclay Goodrow, so this is going to be a very challenging offseason for Drury. I would prefer to wait until I see what the roster looks like to say, well, this is where Lafreniere should go. This is where Kako should go. I'd be surprised if Kako doesn't merit a top 6 shot right away. I'm not sure. Is Lafreniere going to play in the right? Again, I think it's a little bit early, but there is no question that it's a necessity for Lafreniere and Kako to accelerate their progress. I think Kako had a really nice year last year. Lafreniere fell back. Very disappointing season, even a more disappointing playoffs. So I think you almost are starting again with him. This is going to be his third coach too. Kako's third coach too. So again, but you also have a third set of eyes on them, and you'll know more about them. I know there's some criticism of Laviolette, the way he used kids in Washington. Again, I kind of throw out the Washington experience.
Yeah.
He was very, very good with kids in Nashville. He had a very young team that he took to the final. All those guys, Forsberg, Yossi, Brian Ellis, they were really, there was a very young team, and he guided them to the cup. He had young players that thrived on the island, and he did well in Philly. Carolina was more of a veteran team, but I don't think there's I don't think there should be a concern about the way he deals with young players. That's not an issue, and you have fans always want young players. They always want the young players to play, and they kind of recoil at you have to earn your ice time. Well, you do. You have to earn your ice time, and Philip Hedel earned more ice time last year. And I said all year, let's see Lafreniere do the same thing. Let's see Lafreniere force the coach to play him. So we'll see. We'll see. There's a lot here, because I don't think this is a Stanley Cup roster. It could be by September or October. Actually, it doesn't even have to be by October. It just needs to be by March, right?
Yes, you're right.
No, honestly. So, there's a long time. But I think the Rangers are in certainly very competent hands with their head coach.
Well, the first big domino of the offseason was getting a new head coach, and they did in Peter Laviolette, signed a reportedly 3-year, $5 million deal per year. Larry, there's so much more to go over this offseason. I'm sure we'll talk to you again, but thank you so much for giving us all your insight on the Rangers coaching search, and I appreciate you as always, man.
Oh, sure. Anytime.